Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. So we're on part 4 of our series of what would happen if the Separatist Alliance encountered Earth. This episode was brought to you guys with the help of our Patreon supporters who fund us when billion-dollar corporations decide to boycott YouTube. Please click here if you're interested in helping out. Now, if you haven't been watching this series from the start, you should probably head to the first video in this series to get caught up. Now, without any further delay, I present to you guys episode 4, The Burden of Command. Despite what you might think, dead bodies don't always make good fertilizer. There's tons of things that could go wrong when all the rot inside a cadaver spills out into the water supply or an irrigation system for a farm run by alien invaders. The 54th Idaho Militia didn't really stand a chance. No one had thought of destroying the hundreds of deactivated droids lying all over the farming complex. Captain Revan had once again led his men into slaughter. No one should be expected to follow a Jedi into battle. It was the cruelest thing, having men look up to you, admire you, even worship you for your supernatural abilities, only to see them die, betrayed by their own physical limitations, drawn into a situation that no ordinary person could hope to survive. It was ultimately the burden of command which led Revan to lead the Order. The Jedi were trained to be peacekeepers, masters of the Force, not military leaders and tacticians. Geonosis had been a battle that no one was ready for. As a Jedi Knight, Revan was given command of a contingent of clone troopers, despite the fact that he never fought in a war before. And so, a foolish 20-year-old led even more naive 9-year-olds head-on into the embrace of death. Everyone cries for their mom before they die. That is, unless you're a clone or a Jedi. They cry for their brothers instead. It was those similarities that made it so easy for Revan to get along with the men under his command. They shared the same frustrations and jokes that only men bred for servitude could understand. The clones that survived Geonosis quickly came to respect Revan for his skill as a warrior and leader. And the feeling was mutual. To Revan, each one of their identical faces hid a unique imprint in the Force. While other Jedi commanders purposely created a distance between themselves and their soldiers, Revan came to know his men as his family. He began showing them what life was like outside the GAR. He brought them back things from the world, holovids, food that wasn't in paste form, non-regulation clothing, and most importantly, stories and experiences that took place far away from the battlefield. The more Revan gave to them, the more he started to realize how little they actually had. Barely enough time to rest between deployments, battle plans that didn't provide cover, and a future with no hope. And the Jedi were complicit in all of this. Some even saw the clones as merely tools. Those were the ones who usually warned Revan that his attachment to his men and his emotions would lead him to the dark side. But Revan thought that the lack of emotion in the face of such injustice was evil as well. It was the news of what happened at the Battle of Teth that finally pushed Revan over the edge. It was like Geonosis all over again. Instead of waiting for transportation, Jedi led Torrent Company in a suicidal assault up a vertical cliff face. Of course, the Jedi were able to survive the attack, but Torrent Company was decimated. The few who did survive were split up and assigned to different companies. Few outsiders understood what a company to a clone was. It was family. There was no one else waiting for them back home. The Republic definitely didn't understand that. Instead of being penalized for their costly tactics, the Jedi in charge were given praise for their daring victory. Reeves and his men were stationed on Ryloth at the time. Their situation had become hopeless. It took the Kaminoans 9 years to grow a clone, but it took the Separatists only a few minutes to create a B-1 battle droid. There were simply too many of them. Reeves had orchestrated a daring attack on a Seppi command post. The hope was to take out as many leaders as possible, find a ship and fly off to some outer rim planet and leave the war forever. They attacked that night and quickly infiltrated the base. The Separatist leader leading the invasion, Wat Tambor, was oddly enough inspecting that very garrison. So Revan and his men helped themselves to his ship. Upon inspecting the ship's nav computer, they found coordinates for an isolated planet in the unknown region. They decided it was worth a shot. Once they landed on Sol 3, Reeves and his men had to split up. So many individuals with the same face would draw unwanted attention, and as luck would have it, the Separatists arrived on Earth a few months later. When the war started, Reeves was once again thrust into a war he had little interest in fighting. At first he thought of sending a message to the Republic, but his men were deserters, and he was a Jedi who had strayed from the code. Both were dangerous things in the eye of the Republic. But the Separatist blockade soon started and had ended that line of thought. He had been foolish to think that this primitive world could defeat the Separatists. Sure, they could shoot battle droids and blow up outposts, but those were just expenditures for the Trade Federation companies that were exporting agricultural products off the planet. As long as their venture was profitable, the CIS would remain. Reeves needed to reach the Republic. He needed a blockade runner, and he knew just the man to call. The journey across the country was sobering. The infrastructure was more or less destroyed. The people of Sol 3 were suffering. The Separatists bombed the military infrastructure and some of the major cities, but they more or less left the population intact and withdrew to their walled compounds. It was a simple calculation on their part. They had control over a significant amount of farmland across the planet, and their ships in orbit prevented any major attacks on their complexes. So why waste munitions when you could just let the people starve? It was the worst type of apocalypse imaginable. Everyone was alive, but slowly dying. Reeven and his men had first landed in a region known as New England. It was there that they hid Wat Tambor's ship. Reeven had left two of his most trusted men, Captain Darman and Trooper Attin, to watch over it. Reeven was surprised to find that Darman had a pregnant wife. Her name was Skirata. They had started a scrapyard, and the ship was lying there right out in the open. It supposedly looked like some of the spacecraft Sol 3 had developed in earlier attempts at spaceflight, and it fit well next to all the metal sculptures Attin had created. It really moved Reeven to see his men embrace life so fully. It seemed like he had made the right choice. The ship was ready to launch and send a message to the Republic, but they would need a new command code to pass the blockade. In order to find those codes, Reeven needed to infiltrate the CIS shipping facility. They would need to travel south to the great city of New York. Before the war, it was a central hub for all trade and commerce on the planet, but now it was one of the largest Separatist processing centers on the continent. All the agricultural complexes in the region made shipments to the central spaceport in New York City using speeder transports piloted by droids. Really dumb droids. Getting into the spaceport would be as simple as hopping onto one of them. Problem was they were flying several feet off the ground at around 120 miles per hour. They would need a plane. Reeven really fell in love with the planet's mechanical transports. They were primitive but rough and loud. It was a completely different experience from piloting a starfighter or even land speeder. Somehow, without relying on the Force too much, Reeven and the clone troopers managed to get the plane up into the air. They flew low to the ground in order to avoid any detection. A Separatist transport appeared ahead of them. It was easy enough for the clones to jump from one vehicle to the other, but no one was there to hold the control steady while Reeven jumped. The plane exploded, but the transport just kept on going. Like I said, stupid droids. Most of the tinnies were guarding the outside of the spaceport. The interior was more or less empty, which was a relief. The Resistance fighters had often told Reeven horrifying tales about a group of tyrannical officials that once ruled the local ports. The clones found an access point and started hacking into the system looking for the command codes. Reeven also brought a datapad himself and started scanning through all the shipping information. He was trying to find something that he could use and give to the Republic. Suddenly, his eye caught a familiar name. There in the ledger was a list of shipments containing Sol 3 communication equipment. The recipient of the gear was Humanity First. Reeven did another quick search, cross-referencing data about canceled shipments and outposts in the Pacific region. It yielded one result: Marine Agricultural Station Alpha 789. Sol 3's resistance had spent so much effort, so many lives and materials to take out a Separatist fish farm. What better way to fight your enemies than by creating them? The attack on the UN, the attack in San Francisco, and lastly the coordinates in the middle of the Pacific. They wanted to catch humanity off guard. They wanted to lure them out of hiding, convince them that they had won, and when they were celebrating, spring the trap. Many groups like the 54th Idaho Militia were simultaneously wiped out across the planet. It wasn't just coincidence. The real droid control system was still orbiting the Earth. No matter where Reeven went, the Separatists were always one step ahead of him. They retrieved the command codes and went back the same way they came, inside of a Separatist transport. Before nightfall, the ship was ready to launch. Attin and Darman both volunteered to go with Reeven, but it was clear they belonged here. They are now residents of Sol 3. Darman promised to send out a message to the other clone troopers on the planet and inform them of their plan to call the Republic. After breaking free of the blockade, Revan would send all the data they gathered to the GAR and ask for their assistance. Along with the fleet, they would no doubt send an inquiry team to investigate what happened to the rest of his command. The clones would be hunted down. Revan hoped the codes would work and no one would be suspicious that he was traveling inside Wat Tembor's stolen ship. There was no way his ship would be able to outrun the blockade. He approached the line of CIS vessels, and the Separatist battleship Prosperity grew in his viewport. Revan entered the proper command codes and a tractor beam got hold of his transport. The former Jedi turned on the communication systems and began transmitting his prepared data packages back to Sol 3. He was within 50 meters of the landing bay of the Separatist ship now. The hard cell must have seemed tiny near the massive cargo vessel turned war machine. You see, while its sublight engines were quite slow, the hard cell's hyperdrive was Class 1, top of the line. With the right tweaking, one could take the limiters that were governing the hyperdrive off and do some really crazy stuff, like engage the hyperdrive while inside another ship. No one had ever attempted something like this before, so Revan wasn't sure what would happen. But no one had ever given the clones a chance to live a normal life either. Yet, here they were. Darman with his wife and child, and Atine with his metal sculptures. This time, things would be different. This time, he was going to save his men. All of them. What made the Separatists dangerous wasn't their military strength, it was their political savviness. Unlike the Empire, they were much more subtle in their approach when conquering systems. They weren't able to overtly attack people without reason because they risked losing support in what essentially was a civil war. With their economic and technological gifts dangling in front of the leaders of Earth, they could have easily installed a puppet government, or in this case create an insurgency that would require Separatist intervention. In the end, we have to remember that the CIS is led by Sith Lord Count Dooku, and he in turn has to follow the orders of Palpatine. This is a classic Palpatine move. But that's what I think, and your opinion on the matter could be completely different, which is why I usually leave these kind of open-ended. I love watching you guys debate about what happens, and yeah, I'm curious, what do you think happened? Because I clearly don't tell you. Also, if you enjoyed how in-depth we went in about the clone troopers in this episode, I highly recommend you guys check out Karen Travis's Republic Commando series. It's legends now, but for me personally, it will always hold a great amount of truth. The series goes deeply into the lives of these men and follows them from Geonosis to the rise of the Empire. We'll link the books down in the description below. If you do choose to check the book out and purchase it, please use our Amazon links at no additional cost to you guys. We will be getting a small commission for each purchase. As you guys probably know, we're trying to diversify our ad revenue, so excuse us if we continue trying to pitch you guys and sell you things. I know it's really annoying, but we're not really so sure about YouTube's future and ad revenue, and we definitely want to continue growing and making this channel more awesome. So guys, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.